Fall 1980. A cookie factory warehouse at 308 East 53rd Street, Midtown Manhattan. Night. The kind of quiet that only exists in commercial buildings after hours, when the daytime world has gone home and left the darkness to whoever needs it. Vito Borelli walked through that door expecting a meeting. What he found instead was John Gotti, and Gotti was not there to talk. The shots were fast, multiple rounds to the head and body. By the time it was done, Borelli's killers had stripped him down to his underwear and loaded what remained of him into the trunk of a car. Angelo Ruggiero and Frank DeCicco drove toward Queens. At a garage in or near South Ozone Park, they opened the trunk and handed the problem to Roy DeMeo. After that, Vito Borelli ceased to exist in any form that anyone would ever find. Borelli was not a boss, not a capo, not even a made man. He was a peripheral associate who moved at the edges of two crime families. He had once been loosely connected to Philip Rastelli, the Bonanno family boss, and had dated one of Rastelli's nieces. By 1980, he was dating someone far more dangerous to be connected to, a woman named Connie, whose father was Paul Castellano. This is the story of how one offhand remark triggered a multi-family conspiracy that pulled in 10 of the most dangerous men in New York, how it revealed the true purpose of Roy DeMeo and the killing machine he had built inside a Brooklyn neighborhood bar, and what it tells us about what the Mafia was actually built on, not loyalty, not family, but the fragile, murderous ego of men who could not afford to be laughed at. But here is what most people miss. The Vito Borelli story is not really about a man who made a joke. It is about what happens when a powerful man is more terrified of humiliation than he is of consequences. And when that man has Roy DeMeo on speed dial. To understand Borelli's death, you have to understand Roy Albert DeMeo first. And to understand DeMeo, you go back to Flatlands, Brooklyn, 1940. DeMeo was born on September 7, 1940, the fourth of 5 children of Antonio DeMeo, a laundry delivery man, and Eleanor DeMeo, a housewife. His family were Italian immigrants from Formia in the Lazio region, working class, unremarkable on the surface. Roy attended James Madison High School and graduated in 1959. By graduation day, he was already running a small loan sharking operation among his fellow students. Between the ages of 15 and 22, DeMeo also worked as an apprentice butcher at a local grocery store. He learned to break down a carcass, knife precision, how to separate meat from bone. Hold that detail, it matters. Anthony Nino Gaggi, a Gambino associate with ambitions, spotted DeMeo early and recruited him. By the late 1960s, Gaggi and DeMeo were building a loan sharking operation together. DeMeo was simultaneously assembling his own crew on the side, young men from the neighborhood, willing, discreet, capable. The Gemini Lounge stood at 4021 Flatlands Avenue, on the corner of East 41st Street in Brooklyn. From outside, it was nothing. A neighborhood bar, neon in the windows, regulars drinking after work. But the Gemini Lounge had a back apartment accessible through a side door, and in that apartment, by the early 1970s, Roy DeMeo had developed something that federal investigators would later describe as the most efficient murder and disposal system in the history of American organized crime. They called it the Gemini method. Here is exactly how it worked. Step 1. A crew member lured the target through that side door into the back apartment. The victim believed they were coming to a meeting. They were calm. Step 2. DeMeo, or another designated crew member, approached with a silenced pistol in one hand and a towel in the other. One shot to the head. The towel wrapped immediately around the wound to stop blood spray. Step 3. A second crew member stabbed the victim directly in the heart, not for cruelty, for function. Stopping the heart stopped the blood from pumping out of the bullet wound. Step 4. The body was stripped and dragged to the bathroom to drain completely. Step 5. The body was moved onto plastic sheeting and dismembered. Arms, legs, head. Step 6. The parts were bagged, boxed, and transported to the Fountain Avenue landfill in Brooklyn. Thousands of tons of refuse. Nothing came back up. Roy DeMeo's butcher training was not incidental. It was the architecture of the operation. The crew ran this process so efficiently that investigators believe victims could be fully disposed of in under an hour from the moment they walked through the door. The DeMeo crew is estimated responsible for up to 200 murders between the mid-1970s and 1983. Dozens of those victims were never officially confirmed dead because there was simply nothing left to find. By the mid-1970s, the crew was operating across loan sharking, drug trafficking, and a sophisticated stolen vehicle pipeline known as the Empire Boulevard operation. Hot cars were retagged, VINs altered, and moved out of state or overseas, generating millions annually for the Gambino family. The first confirmed crew murder came in 1975 when Andre Katz, a car theft partner who agreed to cooperate with law enforcement, was abducted and killed. DeMeo was not yet a made man. Castellano found him uncontrollable, too volatile, too street-level, but DeMeo kept earning, and in the mid-1970s he made a strategic move that changed his standing. He proposed an alliance with the Westies, the Irish-American gang running Hell's Kitchen on Manhattan's West Side. Unusual, unprecedented at that level. But the partnership worked. It generated serious money for the Gambino family, Castellano noticed. In 1977, Roy DeMeo received his button. He was formally inducted into the Gambino crime family as a made man. Castellano set two conditions: seek permission before any murder and stop dealing drugs. DeMeo agreed to both. He honored neither. Now, you have to understand what Paul Castellano was in 1980. Constantino Paul Castellano was born on June 26, 1915, in Bensonhurst, Brooklyn. His father was a butcher and an early member of the Mangano crime family. His sister Catherine had married Carlo Gambino in 1932, making Castellano both Gambino's cousin and brother-in-law. He received an 8th grade education and spent decades earning his way up through the family. When Gambino died on October 15, 1976, he bypassed his own underboss, Aniello Neil Della Croce, and chose Castellano to succeed him. It shocked the family. Della Croce swallowed it for a while. Castellano was a white-collar boss. He ran a wholesale meat company and trucking operations. He lived in a 10,000-square-foot mansion in Todd Hill, Staten Island, the highest natural point in all 5 boroughs, a place his associates called the White House. He had a Colombian housekeeper named Gloria Olart with whom he was conducting an affair. He thought of himself as an executive, a legitimate businessman who happened to run the most powerful criminal organization in New York. He was also a man constitutionally incapable of tolerating mockery. In 1971, Frank Perdue, the CEO of Perdue Farms, launched one of the most recognizable advertising campaigns in American television history. He appeared in the commercials himself. A lean, older man, angular face, prominent beak-like nose, delivering his tagline in a distinctive, high-pitched voice. It takes a tough man to make a tender chicken. By the mid-1970s, those commercials ran constantly on New York television. You could not watch an hour of TV in Brooklyn without seeing Frank Perdue. Paul Castellano had a prominent nose. He was lean, angular, and in his 60s. The resemblance was not dramatic, but it was there. Enough that if you had a sarcastic turn of mind and were not thinking clearly about where you were, the comparison might surface. Vito Borelli was dating Castellano's daughter, Connie. He had a sarcastic sense of humor. He was not thinking clearly about where he was. The exact circumstances vary across accounts. What is documented is this. At some point in or around 1980, Borelli saw one of those Perdue commercials, looked at the face of his girlfriend's father, and said, "He looks like Frank Perdue." Somebody heard. Somebody talked. The remark reached Castellano. Big Paul did not laugh. What happened next reveals how the Mafia actually processes a boss's personal grievance. Castellano could not simply order the street hit himself without complication. Borelli had prior Bonanno family connections. He had been associated with Philip Rastelli, the imprisoned Bonanno boss, and had dated one of Rastelli's nieces. Moving on him unilaterally risked offense where offense was not needed. So the order traveled up through channels and then across family lines to Salvatore Castellano, the acting boss of the Bonanno family, standing in for the imprisoned Rastelli. Castellano had every reason to be eager. The Bonannos were in a terrible position. They had been stripped of their commission seat. They were under a ban preventing them from inducting new members, a ban that would hold until 1984. Helping Big Paul with a personal matter was exactly the kind of goodwill that could rehabilitate them. Castellano brought in 2 Bonanno captains, Joseph Massino, methodical and rising, and Dominic Sonny Black Napolitano. Massino enlisted his brother-in-law, Salvatore Vitale, and an associate named Duane Leisenheimer to handle logistics. From the Gambino side came John Gotti, then an acting captain, alongside Angelo Ruggiero, Frank DeCicco, John Carneglia, and Joseph Watts. 10 men, 2 families, 1 joke. Borelli was contacted by Bonanno soldier Anthony Rabito and lured to the warehouse at 308 East 53rd Street, a cookie storage facility Rabito operated in Midtown Manhattan. He walked in expecting a conversation. John Gotti and Joseph Watts were waiting. Gotti pulled the trigger. Borelli went down. Outside on the block, Massino, Sonny Black, and the others held their positions as lookouts. The plan then hit its first snag. The stolen panel van, staged outside for transporting the body, would not start. Massino called Vitale. Vitale drove in, tried the van himself, failed, and offered his own car. They wrapped the body in a tan drop cloth, placed it in the trunk, and Ruggiero and DeCicco climbed in. They drove to a garage in or near South Ozone Park, Queens. At the garage, Vitale opened the trunk and saw Borelli for the first time, clad only in underwear, multiple gunshot wounds. Standing there waiting for the body was Roy DeMeo. DeMeo took possession of what remained. What happened next was what always happened next. The Gemini method, applied cleanly, somewhere in Brooklyn, in the dark. Vito Borelli's body has never been found, not one piece. The conspiracy held for 23 years. Roy DeMeo himself did not last much longer. By late 1982, Castellano had concluded that DeMeo had become a liability. Federal investigators were tightening around the car theft operation. DeMeo was too exposed, too dangerous to be left alive and facing indictment. On January 10, 1983, DeMeo attended a crew meeting at Patrick Testa's house in Brooklyn and never came home. 10 days later, on January 20th, his partially frozen body was found in the trunk of his Cadillac Coupe de Ville at the Varuna Boat Club in Sheepshead Bay, Brooklyn. Multiple gunshot wounds to the head. A chandelier had been placed on top of the corpse. Nobody has ever satisfactorily explained the chandelier. Castellano himself lasted 2 more years. On December 16, 1985, John Gotti, the same man who pulled the trigger on Vito Borelli, ordered his own boss shot to death outside Sparks Steakhouse at 210 East 46th Street, Midtown Manhattan, not far from where Borelli had bled out 5 years earlier. The Borelli story did not fully surface until 2003, when Salvatore Vitale became a government witness. He described the logistics: the van that would not start, the drive into Manhattan, the body in the trunk, DeMeo waiting at the Queens garage. In 2004, Joseph Massino became the first sitting boss of any of New York's 5 families to cooperate with federal authorities. Court documents confirmed everything Vitale had described. The Borelli hit was entered as Rule 404B evidence in multiple subsequent proceedings. In 2011, testifying against Bonanno acting boss Vincent Vinnie Gorgeous Basciano, Massino named John Gotti directly as the man who fired the shots that ended Vito Borelli's life. Gotti had died in federal prison on June 10, 2002, serving a life sentence for racketeering and murder. He never answered for 308 East 53rd Street. Here is what this story actually reveals. Not about violence. That is documented everywhere. What it reveals is the specific function of humiliation inside a criminal hierarchy. Castellano killed a man for a joke, not a betrayal, not a threat, not an act of theft or conspiracy against the family's business. A joke, a passing remark about a nose in a chicken commercial. No money was stolen. No deal was endangered. No one was physically threatened. A young man made an observation that was probably true and definitely funny in the wrong room to the wrong people. The response required 10 men, 2 organized crime families, a multi-stage logistical operation spanning 2 boroughs, and one of the most cold-blooded disposal specialists in American criminal history. That is what the Mafia actually ran on. Not loyalty, not honor, the absolute enforcement of ego. Every man in that world understood that the boss could not be mocked, could not be diminished, not even in private, because there were no private conversations. There were no rooms safe enough. There were no friends close enough. Vito Borelli was dating the man's daughter. He thought he was inside the circle. He thought proximity meant protection. It did not. The joke lasted 3 seconds. The response lasted 20 years, 10 killers, and 1 man who was never found. Roy DeMeo was always a phone call away. If this story got inside your head, you know what to do. Subscribe to Mafia Talks, new documentary every week. Drop a comment below. What figure should we cover next? The name you leave might be the next story we tell.